All right, you can see that leaf and see how it's kind of lopsided? Lopsided, heart-shaped? That's a basswood, right? Basswood, or sometimes called American linden. And the reason they call it basswood is not because it has anything to do with fish, but because of the bast fibers, B-A-S-T. This is the wood that the wood carvers love this wood because it has a very fine, consistent grain. It's very soft, real easy to work with. You ever go to wood carving shows where you see the guys that they carve these, gals that carve these birds with their wings out and every feather carved? It's basswood. And they call it basswood because of the fibers inside the inner bark. There's three kinds of plant fibers that are used. There's seed fibers. I bet you can think of something that's a seed fiber. We're all wearing it.
Cotton.
Cotton, right? All right, and also coconut. You can take the husk of the coconut and it's made into those doormats. That's another seed fiber. Then there's also what they call leaf fibers or structural fibers. That'd be like in the yuccas and the baling twine made out of agave or sisal. And then there's bast fibers. Bast fibers are the inner bark fibers, usually right tied in with the phloem. You have xylem that goes up, phloem that comes down on the outside. And see these fibers that are in here? Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Now you can take these and soak it in the water for a while till it kind of semi-rots, and you can spin it up. In fact, actually, see this sort of reddish one here? This is basswood fiber. This is the basswood fiber rope right here on my pack. And the spring is actually fairly tender, and there's some permaculturists who say you don't have to plant lettuce anymore. Just plant a hedge of basswood and just pick the leaves every spring, and you can have your own little greens. To me, they're all right, but I don't know if I'd think they would really replace a big bed of lettuce. But you see these fibers in there?
Yeah.
So these and hickory barks and all these are very useful fibers. One time I was talking to an old mountain man. He said, yeah, my wife's people, they're out running the dogs one night, and the dogs got on the trail of a bobcat. And that bobcat ran those dogs all over the mountain. When they finally got up, that cat got backed up against a big rock cliff. Any critter's being chased by a pack of dogs wants to kind of keep its rear end covered so it can fight off the dog. And it's holding off this whole pack of dogs. And I guess one of those dogs got brave and jumped up onto that cat. You ever played with a cat? Sometimes when you play with them, they roll over on their back and they start going like this. Yeah. And it's time to ease up on a little puff, right? Well, that's the last defense that a cat has when it's being attacked. And I guess what happened was that dog leapt onto that cat rolled over and raked with those long claws. And by the time those people got up to their dogs, the pack of dogs were running around all disoriented. The cat was gone. And that one dog was laying there with his belly cut open, his guts spilled up in the leaves. You know what they did? They went over to a little hickory tree, or it could have been a basswood tree, and they just pulled some strips off of there. And then they went and got it, thinned it down a little bit. And then they went and took that dog and punched holes in the edge of his belly, put his guts back in, sewed that dog up with bark, and that dog lived. Wow. Now that story is told as true. Now I wasn't there. I don't know if it's true. I don't even know if I care if it's true. What it's talking about is fluidity with the natural environment. This is the kind of things we're trying to do. You need something to tie something up with, look for a basswood tree. Look for a hickory tree. And get some bark off of it, And so this tree is kind of more of a northern tree, and it's the ones that many of the natives use that for their basketry material. And it's the favorite food of the porcupines. And it's distinctive because it's sort of heart-shaped, but almost every heart shape is a little bit lopsided. See how it's kind of a little lopsided on one side? Okay. So basswood.
Does it get very big?
It's a big tree. It's become a big tree. Yeah, enough they get wood that they use for carving off of it. And it makes.
I found these on the ground.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's little mule poop. No. No, those are little aborted hickory nuts.
Hickory nuts.
Yeah, and
Why do you call them aborted?
Well, because they didn't get ripe. They started to form, and then a worm or something got into them, and the tree just dropped them.
Oh, there was a lot of them right there.
Right. And these look like they just didn't get ripe.
Oh.
And they'll
be green if it was ripe.
It'd be green. Well, had thicker shells. It'd be cracking open if it was ripe, and it'd be a little later in the year.
Oh.
Right. So this probably happened this year. Earlier in the season. This is kind of the right place for it. Yeah, here it is, right here. Right here, see the little yellow flowers? There's another one here. This is one of the St. John's worts. Now the St. John's wort, the famous one is the European St. John's wort. It's called Hypericum punctatum. When you look at the leaf, you look, it looks like it's been punctured, and there are little oil glands in it. Now this one, did I say, I said punctatum? I meant perforatum.
Yeah.
Perforatum. This one is punctatum. All right, now this one, if you look at the underneath the leaves, and maybe you might have to be younger than 40, I don't know. You can see little tiny black dots under the leaves. Little tiny black dots. You can pass it around if you want, or come pick one if you'd like. And that's punctate. No, that wouldn't be it. That wouldn't work. That wouldn't be it either.
Flower, right?
Yeah, yeah. You see, it's an opposite leaf plant,
Okay.
and it has these little yellow flowers. The active ingredient is at least tied in with this compound called hypericin. And the hypericin supposedly is marked, you can tell it by squeezing the plant. And the European one, you can squeeze the flower, and you squeeze this yellow flower and your finger will turn purple. And that's supposed to be an indicator of the hypericin content. Well, so we don't have a lot of the European St. John's wort here in the south, but we have like 15 other kinds of St. John's worts. We have big bushy St. John's worts. We have little tiny dwarf St. John's worts. We have these kind of St. John's wort. And so a lot of us started going around squeezing our St. John's worts. And we started squeezing this one, and we realized that this one, now on the European kind, you can, in fact, can I borrow your notebook a minute? You can squeeze even the leaves, which you can't get it out of the European one. You can squeeze the leaves and you can get a purple. Look at that purple color. Isn't that amazing that green leaf gives that purple, right? And so I went over to, I happen to know the president of Gaia Herbs, the big herb company over in Brevard, and Rick Scalzo. I said, Rick, if that purple is an indicator for the hypericin content, and that's what they standardized the compound, the tinctures to, is the St. John's wort. I said, then I think our native St. John's wort, this one species, has more than the commercial European kind. And he says, well, bring me some. I'll run it through the lab. So I bought him a big old bouquet of it, and he checked it out and said it was the highest hypericin content he'd ever found in any St. John's wort anywhere. So our local St. John's wort, makes good. So this is the one. So this is punctatum. Punctatum means little black dots. Punctuation, little black dots. When you're punctual, you're on the dot, right? So that's really a good way to kind of remember.
We could gather that and
we gather that and
with it, or
make a tincture with it, right? And tell you the truth, what got me going on this was I talked to somebody who had a kind of a practice, and she said, well, I'm growing the European St. John's wort in my garden, but the stuff that grows here on the edge of my field seems like it's actually better with my patients. And that got me curious. I started squeezing it and realized that this one, when I squeeze the others, I don't get any of that purple out of it. But there it is. So Hypericum punctatum, not particularly handsome specimens, but I wasn't sure we'd see any more. And it's kind of an interesting plant, and it's interesting that it can be useful. And you can kind of, it'll show up around the edge of your yard and your garden and stuff like that, and you can kind of just shake it and let the seeds go out, and it'll kind of come back stronger every year. Now see, I'm trying to identify this plant, trying to see if I really know if I'm really getting you the right plant. Now I think I can tell by seeing, but the way I'm going to know for sure is by smelling. Tasting. Yep. Who's got a pocket knife? Or clippers? Anybody? All right, so what we're going to do, take some pieces of that, pass it around, chew on them a little bit, and this is a black birch, the stem. All right, I'm going to just take these and just going to start cutting some little pieces, and they're going to fly everywhere, and I want you all to pick them up and eat them. Not eat them, but chew them, okay? Yeah, this is black birch. So there you go. So this not only does it taste like toothpaste, not only does it work like a toothbrush, but it tastes like toothpaste. Did you get a taste of that?
Yeah.
You got some?
I haven't tasted it. Of the actual leaf?
No, the stem. Here.
I mean, you can taste that really good.
Here's a bigger stick. And then you get that nice toothpastey flavor. And so that's black birch, right? Or sometimes called toothbrush twig, or sweet birch, and makes a wonderful tea. And all right, and look, and while we're looking, let's see. I had a few other things we were going to talk about. Here's a young hickory tree. And this also would produce a very useful bark. I'm not going to cut into this. Well, maybe I'll cut this little branch off of the tree. You know, and when I'm cutting on these trees, you know, it's like you know, you talk to the Native Americans and they talk about they'd always offer a prayer or offer tobacco or something before you'd actually take something from a plant. And so that's sort of hard for us in this Western world to try to figure out, you know. And one of the things that I realized that we can do is, I mean, if I wanted to take a little piece of this plant, I could go break this off here like this, and it would still somehow manage to survive. Or I could just cut the branch out here, and the branch, it wouldn't kill the tree, but it would be a hard time for that tree to have to kind of heal that. And so what I do when I'm trying to get a specimen or something that we want to taste, I try to get it real close to the tree, cut it with my sharp knife, and cut it real close, and it'll be able to heal up, just like as if I was pruning one of my prized fruit trees. And so it's one of the ways to kind of make my prayerfulness and make it an action is try to think about what we're doing. You know, we've got these highly educated Western minds. We can at least think about it and try to figure out how to put, and that's one way to put our honor and our respect towards these plants is when we gather them, try to gather them in a way that makes as little impact as possible. And so we're talking about that getting bark off the trees, and you see the hickory bark. And this is not the best time for getting the bark off, but still comes off. And you see you can make that as a cordage. And those people that were talking about sewing up that dog, they sewed it up with hickory bark. There's actually a song about that. The song goes like this. It was recorded by the Georgia Yellowhammers back in the 1920s. Some of the first country groups that were ever recorded. And they had a song about the farmers celebrating the spring, and it kind of goes, when the birds began their singing in the trees, and the rabbit and the possum be at ease, oh how happy we will be when we hear that whoa-haw-gee, the commands you give to a mule, right, whoa-haw-gee. When the birds begin their singing in the trees, and the second verse goes, soon the crabgrass will be growing in our fields, and the whippoorwill be giving off his peel, and the hickory bark will skin, and our old gear we can mend. When the birds begin their singing in the trees. I couldn't believe it when I heard that. I mean, they're singing about it. They're singing about something we wouldn't even know what they're talking about till we knew about how you could take the bark off a hickory, use it to tie things. You get a bigger hickory than this, you can pull big strips of bark off, use it to bottom chairs, use it to tie up some of your gear, use it for all kinds of lacing material. So it's kind of amazing. And you know, the hickory nuts, now some of you probably tasted hickory nuts. They taste so good. You take them and you crack them and you try to pick those little bits of nuts out of there. You wonder, it tastes so good and they're so good for you. Would you slowly starve to death if you had all the hickory nuts you wanted and you were trying to crack them? You know, how did Native Americans take advantage of these things? What they would do is they had nutting rocks. And I can remember being in the museum, and it was an anthropology museum, and they had 3,000-year-old nutting rock. It was just a great big old rock with a little dent in it. You know, and what they do is they put the rock in, they put the nut in there and go crack. Put another nut in there, crack. And they just keep crack till there's just cracked nuts and nutshells and meats everywhere. And then they scrape it all off into a container, boil it, and then the hickory nuts shells would sail to the bottom. The oils and some of the meats would come out of the top, and then basically they would make a nut milk. You ever made almond milk? Do the same thing. You boil the almonds, put them in a blender, beat them up, and that's so that they would make a hickory nut milk. And we have done that, and it really makes a great. Oh, it makes a great thing, a great drink. Oh, look at this! Look at what these guys have got. They've got the praying mantis, and I think this one might even be our native praying mantis. The really big one is the one that's from Asia. This one might even be the Carolina mantis.
Oh, great.
Looks like a leaf in the back.
Those are its wings, and they might be the immature wings, but you know the praying mantis, and they're praying. They look like they're praying and prayerful, but they're really praying P-R-E-Y-E. You know, and they catch things. And you ever fed them grasshoppers? Oh, it's impressive. And you know, of course, the famous thing is the courtship, right? Right, right. As soon as he hooks up onto her, she turns around and starts devouring him. And they say that actually what happens when she eats through his head, there's sort of like a nervous system there, kind of like a brain. And they say that once he loses his head, he's a better lover. Keep that in mind. And I watched one. He's still pumping away, and she's working away, got him down his thorax. Now, the next morning, there's nothing left but a big and gorgeous female and a few wings and a couple legs. That was all that was left. So he gave the ultimate gift, right?
He fed the babies in a van.
Stand up.
Oh, it came off the ground, didn't it?
Well, it came in a little group. Actually, it
Oh yeah, I'm not sure what that is. That's good for you for observing. All right, let's see. Was there something else over here? I thought there was about 3 things here. Well, you know, look at this. There's so much stuff we could talk about here. Look at this. See this little pine tree here? All right, so how do you tell pine trees? You know, some of them, you can tell them. How do you tell what kind they are? Well, one of the things is you can count the needles, and you see you count the needles in a little every little cluster of needles and count them, and what do you get? 5 needles. W-H-I-T-E, white pine, right? And you see it is kind of white. See how it's kind of whiter than most pines? And see, this is kind of an example. This is a young tree, and you see what happens. See this little cluster of buds right up here? Okay, little cluster of buds. That's going to be the branches next year. It's got a king bud in the middle. That's going to put the one out of the center, and it's going to put out a cluster here. So then you realize that this is next year's bud. That means that this tree grew. All these branches grew this last year. It grew that tall. So look at that. It grew more than a foot in 1 year, right? And then that means you can count back and look. Okay, here it is. So here's 1 year, 2 years. 3 years, maybe 4 years old. So this little tree is 4 years old. And you can actually look at big pine trees, especially white pines, and you can see they have those rings. And you can pretty much start at the top and count down, and you can get a pretty good idea of how old that tree is without cutting it down and counting the rings. So it's kind of interesting to think about that. And pine needles actually contain a little bit of vitamin C in them. So you know you actually can make a tea out of pine needles, and it's fairly pleasant, a little bit piney tasting. But you can taste some of these leaves. You can get a little bit of a tang to them. Just about kind of bite the back of them, and that tang is supposed to be vitamin C, ascorbic acid. So, all right, well, let's see. What else have we got here? Should we wander on up a little further since we made it this far?
Sure.
I mean, what the heck? 4:20? We're supposed to be back at 5:30, isn't that what she said?
Back to the trailhead.
I think so, 5:30, I think. On that little thicket where it looked like it had been a beaver dam or something, we were going to maybe explore that on the way back, but let's see where we get to.
Yeah.
On here, what they call desmodium. And these are the tick seeds, they call them. And see how they stick to you? They're the little ones. See them forming right there, right along the trail, just ready to catch on to you.
Are they native?
They're native. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And they're just part of the scene here. You can see they take you.
The fruits?
Well, you kind of can eat those little tiny. They're like little tiny beans. But you know they're not formed at this stage. But you can see they're just starting to form, and they're the ones that stick to you.
It's like a little opening in the woods here.